Hey guys, so it is time for the long-awaited It Chapter 2 review. I can't believe I'm already reviewing this and I've seen it and it just happened. Of course, this is a sequel, or better called a part 2 to the first movie It that came out almost exactly 2 years ago, and I think it was one of the most hyped movies of 2017. So naturally, when they announced It Chapter 2, it became the most hyped movie, not just horror movie, but movie in general, I think, for most people, including non-horror fans. I think this was a majority of people's most anticipated of 2019. That whole sentence paragraph thing did not make sense, but I'm not gonna repeat it. So It Chapter 2, of course, takes place 27 years after the first movie, and it follows the Losers Club as adults and Pennywise taking new victims. So Mike calls up the group, the other losers, because he never left Derry, and tells them the situation and what's going on, and then there's a reunion. I was gonna say reunited, but that's like not a noun. Anyway, Mike calls up the group, tells them about the pact, or reminds them about the pact that they made 27 years ago, that if Pennywise ever resurfaced, that they would reunite and help take down Pennywise finally. So all but one of the Losers Club return to Derry, and they start facing Pennywise's new horrors that it shows them. And I really love that they changed the horror aspects and the horror elements and the fears of the Losers Club as they age, because obviously our fears change and grow and become way more intense as we become adults. I do want to mention that there will be spoilers in this review, but only starting at this timestamp, so avoid watching after this time in order to avoid the spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. But I wanted to do a little spoiler-free review too for those of you who haven't seen it yet, so let's get on to that. So I want to start off the review by talking about the casting in this movie. Oh my gosh, I think we were all blown away by the casting that was done for this film and how all these big actors came together to represent the Losers Club as adults, because they are so accurately depicted, not just in physical features, because obviously they look just like the kids do, but also in their behavior and mannerisms and things. They're just like the same people. Like, they're so believable. Like, you always knew who each character was meant to be. There was no confusion on that whatsoever. So the kids do make more appearances in part 2, which we expected, but it was a lot more than I thought it was going to be, which I don't hate. I actually enjoyed seeing the kids again and seeing these scenes that weren't in the part 1, but a continuation of some of the parts, I guess, in the first film. So there's multiple flashbacks and everything to when they were children and stuff to help kind of move along the plot and fill in the gaps and things like that. And they actually had to de-age the children in post because they had grown so much in the 2 years between filming the movies that they look too old to be those children again and to have, you know, to make it work in the flashbacks, so they had to de-age them in post. Isn't that weird? So as I mentioned about their fears getting a little bit more intense, I definitely think the scares in It Chapter 2 were far more intense and way scarier, which is so impressive because the first movie I thought was horrifying. The horror elements that were in there were terrifying, and the movie as a whole isn't necessarily like a super scary film because there's a lot of comedy aspects thrown in there, and that continues with It Chapter 2, but we'll get to the comedy in a second. But the fact that this movie was more horrifying and the horror in it, oh my god. I actually think there might be more horror type stuff in the first part. I don't know if that's just me, but I felt scared more frequently in the first part, but I felt more terrified in the second part. I don't want to hype up the horror elements too much though, so just take my opinion with a grain of salt. It was effective for me. That does not mean that it will be effective for you or be as terrifying to you, so just keep that in mind. So this leads us into our first criticism of the movie. I really could have had more horror. Like I said, the first part I think made me feel afraid more frequently, and I really loved that. And then this one, it's obviously longer. I think it's at least 30 minutes longer than the first one. So there was more horror packed into the 2-hour 15-minute film of part 1, and then this one was 2 hours and 47 minutes. So there was a lot more plot and drama and story building and things like that in part 2, which I didn't hate. Like there's really nothing about this movie that I like hate with a passion or like wish that they changed. I don't know. I could have done with a little less drama, especially because some of the moments were a little cheesy. I'm sorry to say that. I know they were trying to have like meaningful, sad moments here and there, and I get it. I just would have preferred more horror elements, less cheesy moments to kind of balance it out, but that's just like kind of me nitpicking because generally I did really love this movie, in case I didn't say that yet. I really love this movie. Also, my next criticism comedy. The comedy in this, like I said, the first part obviously has comedy in it. I felt like it was a little try hard at times. Not all of the jokes landed for me, but the second one felt even more try hard, and their timing of the comedy was very strange sometimes. It was almost like in the same beat of a horror moment or like a meaningful moment. They would have a joke in there and it just was kind of jarring and like weird timing and weird placement for a joke, in my opinion. But it was funny. I did laugh many times. I just don't think that it needed as much comedy, and sometimes it felt a little forced. Obviously, the people in this movie are naturally funny, but it just felt like some of the written jokes in there were a little bit too much, and they could have dialed it back a little bit, because it doesn't have to be a comedy movie. It is, after all, at the end of the day, a horror movie, and so to tone down the comedy, I think it would have helped it a lot. It was almost a whole hour longer than the original TV series, which doesn't feel like it, and it's really impressive that we have like a 5-hour chunk of this movie series, 2-part series, and it doesn't feel like it's dragging on and on. So I'm kind of glad we got that more content, but it was done in a way that didn't feel like it was ever too long. I know a lot of people were a little shocked, me included, when we saw movie length time of part 2, and yeah, it was very daunting to see it was 2 hours and 47 minutes. You gotta prepare, you gotta make sure you eat and get your water in, because you're gonna be sitting there for quite a long time. I thought many times during watching this movie, I can't wait to have both on DVD and have like a mini marathon again and be able to watch them back to back and just have like a 5-hour concise chunk of entertainment, which is really nice to have it now we've seen the complete story and know that that's where it ends. Sometimes it's really scary to watch a movie and think, oh, there's probably gonna be another sequel, because this time that's it. We're done. The story's over, and I appreciate that so much, because I think in Hollywood it's really hard when something makes so much money for them to not continue it, but with this series you cannot continue it, especially in this world of remakes and sequels. I mean, if you look at the lineup so far for 2020, which if you want a video on prematurely I can do, there's been some release dates and things for 2020, at least half of them so far are remakes or sequels. So technically It Chapter 2, it's a remake and a sequel, but to me that's not a negative. It's obviously done very well, and there won't be another sequel, so they know when to end it because they have to. So before we go into spoilers, I did want to point out, I'm going to put up a list of trigger warnings for the movie, because the very first scene of the movie was very disturbing and very hard to watch for me, so I just wanted to put it up so you guys can know going into it before, so you're a little bit more prepared than I was, because it was very shocking and very difficult. So there you go. So my very favorite part of the movie has to be saved for spoilers, so we're gonna get into those now. There was, you know, talk of it going around online, but I just wanted to keep it in the spoiler section just in case. So if you haven't like seen it, or, you know, I don't know, if you just, I just want to keep it away so you guys can decide whether or not you want to hear it or not, and me not just throw it out on you. So here we go, getting into spoilers now. Stephen King's cameo. That's it. That's the movie. No, but really, Stephen King being in this movie and his cameo is the highlight of my year as a horror fan. That's my favorite part of the whole movie. I know it has nothing to do with the movie really, or the story, or the horror, but that was my favorite part, sorry. Also the fact that Bill went on to later be a writer and then was criticized for not being able to write a good ending, and then that's something that Stephen King's been criticized for, and to have actual Stephen King berate Bill, the character, for his bad endings, I thought was just perfection. Stanley and Bowers. So Bowers comes back, and I really love that. First of all, casting phenomenal again, no surprise there. Looks exactly the same. I believe that is, you know, young Bowers. I almost wish he was in it more, to be honest, but the fact, like the whole scene with him and Eddie and their interaction and him stabbing him, that whole thing was so good to me and I loved it. It was shocking in a way that I didn't expect it to go, and it was good. So obviously there's major plot points in this, with Stanley not being able to handle the fact that Pennywise is back and he made this pact, so he removes himself from the situation entirely. Like, that was very sad and heartbreaking to watch. And then I did really enjoy this is like a weird, you know, thing to say right after I say that's very sad to watch him die, but when it becomes his head and it's, you know, kind of like The Thing. Oh, you can't even see that. The thing's on my shirt, so that's why I was like referencing my shirt anyway. When he becomes like a spider thing using Stanley's head, I thought was really, really amazing and haunting and such a cool image. And then we have the reveal that Richie is gay and was actually in love with Eddie. And I actually read an article that was interesting about this whole scenario and this situation. With Richie being gay and him being closeted his whole life. They made points like with him working in the industry that he does, being a comedian, and also living in a big city, it's not realistic that he would be closeted his whole life. But I kind of disagree. I think that you don't know everyone's situation, and I don't think that that should completely negate his whole story in the film just because it's unbelievable or unrealistic for him to be closeted or whatever. Like, I just thought that was like a weird critique of the story, but then again, I'm not in that community, so I can't really speak on that, but I did really enjoy that storyline and seeing his, you know, growth and development. And when you see Eddie die and he's just so heartbroken over it, I really did love those scenes. However, cheesy and jokey some of them were. So final thoughts, I just want to say my favorite horror scene of the movie was definitely Beverly with the old woman, which there was a whole trailer released, but I think they did an amazing job with the trailers this year because they kept it something secret and they didn't show everything, which has been such a struggle lately because you just don't know which trailers to avoid. And I was avoiding Black Christmas, the new remake that's coming out this year. I was trying to avoid the trailers because people were like, there's a huge spoiler in it. What trailer plays before It Chapter 2? Black Christmas. I almost walked out. Anyway, Beverly with the old woman. Oh my gosh, when she becomes a giant and starts running and stomping down the hallway from the dark. My God, that was so traumatizing to me. Like, that is like such good horror to me. I loved it. It has that like weird, really disturbing, you don't know what you're looking at kind of imagery, and the sounds, the audio of her stomping. Like, you have to see it in theaters just for that scene because oh my God. Those were easily the best parts of the film. It's when they had to go back and get their little memorable item to do the ritual at the end, and when we got to see their like horror moments. Oh my gosh, that was so good. Not as good as Stephen King being in it, but you know, it was all right. So that's kind of all I want to talk about for It Chapter 2. I feel like I could go on and on though. Like, it's so hard because I just want to like pour my soul out and like talk about it because there's so many good scenes. But I really, really did love it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it down below if you've seen it already. If not, go watch it. It's amazing. I wasn't really that surprised that I loved it though, so who knows if it'll be my favorite movie of the year, which I am going to be doing a recap in December. Obviously it's a little early to talk about that because it's just September, but in December I will be doing another one like I did last year of the best and the worst of 2019. So look forward to that. This will probably be on the best list, but that's not really shocking. But we'll see if it's my favorite. Who knows? There's still lots of horror to be watched this year. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Sorry for the shitty lighting and the glare on my glasses. Hopefully that wasn't too distracting for you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.